to continue where I finished on the other side, these Durham Light Infantry performed a marvellous job in refuelling and arming the planes when they landed from the aircraft carrier. That the Germans got a bit of a shock when they came over and found them Spitfires and Hurricanes in the air waiting for them. And it was quite an air battle. They lost quite a few planes that way. Before I go on further, I'm going back in time because things I've listened to the tape previously, there's several things I've forgotten. Firstly, when I went to Malta in 1940, there was 40 of us in our draft, one officer, one corporal, and the rest of us were privates. The majority of them were reservists or regular soldiers returned into Malta, and the balance of us were territorials or national servicemen. And it was a nice compact little group, and the reservists were the salt of the earth. I was only 19, that's where most of my fellow territorials and national servicemen, and they looked after us like fathers. I can't say no more praise than that. Also, another thing I should point out, that we was told when we got to Malta that if we got sunburnt and got ill through it, it was counted as a self-inflicted injury, which put the damper on sunbathing a lot. Also, when I mentioned Tiny Hamilton, when he was hospitalised, I treated him for a time. I spent an hour or more on end picking up with a pair of tweezers bits and pieces for his back. Anyway, he amply repaid that later on, just exactly when I can't remember where, but I was in Valletta one night with a couple of others and got well drunk and was staggering around, and Tiny found us, sitting with me, instead of putting us in the nick, he put us up in Yorkshire for the night, and even brought us an egg sandwich each. But to continue, the early part of 1942 was very, very dodgy. At Easter time, I was billeted with the cooks, and they asked me to go to the cookhouse and make a bucket of tea. So I went to the cookhouse, put the bucket down, and turned the geyser on. Unfortunately, the bucket fell over and scalded my foot, so I ended up in hospital. And whilst in hospital, you could see the aerodrome from the ward I was in the old barrack area, and whenever there's an air raid, they used to pull the beds out from the wall to make it safe for us. And it was whilst we were in there that we heard that George VI had awarded the George Cross to the people of Malta. And we all said to ourselves, well, this is it, we're going to surrender at any time now, because we can't carry on like this indefinitely, because the guns were on reduced ammunition, food was virtually all gone, and the actual guns themselves, they had to save their ammunition for when bulk of it for when convoys came in, to give them protection. 2 or 3 convoys tried to get through. Out of one convoy that set off, only one boat got through. Then whilst around about that time, I got when I came out of hospital, I was put in the company's quartermaster's store to help out there. And whilst there, I got friendly with Mr. and Mrs. Goslin. Wally, he was a retired RA Royal Engineer soldier, well in his 60s, who was held responsible for the emergency power unit that served the hospital. And I used to go and visit them in their little accommodation. And Pauline, his wife, said she would teach me or continue my knowledge of French, because she's a very educated woman. She spoke Maltese, obviously, English, French and Italian like another language. So she was teaching me French, and she was telling me that her and Wally were only like brother and sister. So one thing led to another, and we became lovers. I was about 21 at the time, 21, and she was in her middle 30s, but her husband was in his 60s, so it was a rather peculiar setup. But it proved a little haven and made a bit of peace for me. Anyway, sometime in about June, July 42, I'm standing in the doorway of the stores watching this raid in progress. The barrage has gone up, the planes are diving over us, Spitfires are chasing the Ju-88s, MEs are trying to chase the Spitfires, it's all going on. And then this Ju-88 coming towards, I saw a Spitfire on his tail, and he must have seen the Spitfire there as well, because instead of releasing him a little bit later on the aerodrome, he released one on us. I saw these bombs showering down towards us, and I was sort of transfixed in the doorway. I didn't know what to bloody well do. And the next thing I know, I'm blown off my feet, right inside the room. Felt a terrible singing in the ears, and a little bit of a pain in my left elbow. So as soon as that I picked on my feet, I dived into a slip trench which was nearby, and in the slip trench was the Sergeant Cook, Paddy Malone, and a couple of young girls from the Memoirs quarters who'd been stranded in Malta at the outbreak of the war. And there's Paddy there singing "Pack Up Your Troubles" as top of his voice. You couldn't hear, all you could see him in mouth that you couldn't hear because of the noise from the battle going on. Anyway, it transpired that stick of bombs fell amongst a load of DLIs who were mounting a guard mounting parade for prisoners of war, and I think there was 4 killed. The sergeant lost an arm, and several others were seriously wounded, and destroyed the ambulance and caused a lot of damage. That was one incident I shouldn't forget. It turned out later on that I had a perforated eardrum as well. Then we got down to the state, and we was on our emergency rations, and we knew there was a convoy on the way and was hoping it would get through. Well, we kept on hearing reports, because they issue a daily communique for local consumption only, because we were cut off, so nobody else could get to know about it. And we heard about the damage to some of our ships previously. Anyway, we heard the convoy was coming near, so we got down. I went down to Valletta on the day off, and I was lucky enough to be there when the convoy came in the harbour. 3 boats, and the crowds all round the high barrackers all surrounding the harbour were cheering like hell, because it meant salvation. It meant we didn't have to surrender. And they came in. I think it was later on or the next day, the Brisbane Star, which had been badly damaged, and left the convoy and crept along by herself. She came in, and then the tanker Ohio, which had been bombed, set on fire, been abandoned twice, and reboarded again, and even then a Ju-87 Stuka crashed on her decks. Finally, she was brought into the harbour, towed to 2 boats, naval vessels, but the decks were washed, but she brought in the vital oil that the planes needed and the kerosene for cooking, without which we would have had to surrender. All in all, it was very momentous days. Quite a celebration amongst the local population, I can assure you. About this time as well, whether it be before this or after, I can't remember, I had to be in Tarboro and talking to a friend of mine there, Charlie Hirons. We'd spent a lot of the day doing clearing up bomb damage and cleaning up in general. He said, come on, he said, we're going to Rabat for a drink. So I said, oh, okay. So to get to Rabat, we had to go down the hill and up the hill the other side into this village, Rabat. Well, halfway up the hill, we heard a siren go, and then we looking up, saw these waves of German aircraft coming over. I thought, right, just get up there, get in a shelter quick. Anyway, we got to the top of the hill, and we heard the bombs coming down, so we dived into the civilian shelter, and the earth was shaking. Some of the flakes were coming off the roof of the shelter, and the Maltese, they were scaring you. They're all saying their prayers, and, you know, that scared me much of the bombs, I think. Anyway, things quietened down, and we came out of the shelter, and about 20-30 yards away was a square. But when we got to the square, a bomb had fallen right amongst a herd of goats, and they were all in bits and pieces. The goat herd was laying face down with the back of his head off, and the hotel in the square, which was used as a billet for the RAF pilots from Talbot Aerodrome, and they had a direct hit. And some of the pilots had been on the roof watching the raid. So Charlie and I went over to see what we could do. We saw this arm. I pulled the arm and it came off my hand, and it nearly turned me over. Anyway, by then the rescue services came along and we couldn't do much more, so we went back to Intarpa. We never did get our drink. Then another little incident to show you what life was like there. In the sort of hall affair they had there, sort of gymnasium affair, they should do film shows once a week. The first show, starting at 6, was for other ranks. The second show at 8 o'clock was for senior NCOs and officers. Well, that meant anybody on duty to 8 o'clock never saw a film. And I've been voted on to the entertainments committee of our unit. And at a meeting, I suggested that, to be fair, so that everybody got a chance to see the film, they made both performances open to all ranks. And the chairman of the entertainment committee, Major Buckley, a right nasty bit of work, tried to pooh-pooh it. Anyway, they had a vote, and it was passed okay. Well, this Major Buckley, after that, he hated my guts, because he was also the chairman of the promotion board, and several times I would put up for promotion, and he bettered it every time. In fact, at that time, about 1942-ish, out of the 40 that went to Malta, I was the only one still remaining a private soldier. One of them had had even become Sergeant Major, so it shows you. Didn't pay. He told me I was a barrack room lawyer, which I probably was anyway. There's another little incident. We had to do PT, and on the square by the gymnasium, big open space, hockey pitch. So we was out there doing PT under the charge of this Major Parry, I think it was, and there was a heavy air raid on, and the aircraft were dispersed only 400 yards away, and they were bombing these aircraft, and the shrapnel was coming down like bloody rain from our own anti-aircraft guns. So I broke ranks and went and stood under the shelter of the doorway of the gymnasium. So this Major Parry comes rushing at me. "What are you doing here, Gates? What are you? Get back into there." I said, "Well," I said, "it's dangerous." I said, "No point in taking an unnecessary risk." He said, "Do as you're told." He said, "If I had my way, so I'd give you full punishment. If you went at me, said you, being tied to the will of a gun carriage." I said, "Well," so I said, "I'm only quoting what they say in command orders, that when not on duty or doing anything urgent, take shelter during air raids." All right. Anyway, I was so bloody annoyed with him that I went to see the Sergeant Major, who I'm on good terms with, told him what had happened. I said, he said, "Well," he said, "the man was stupid." He said, "To have you out there when there's enemy actions going on." Anyway, apparently this Major got a bit of a rollicking over it. Then on another occasion, we had to, part of our training, we had to attend a post-mortem. And this post-mortem was on a young Maltese girl married to an English soldier. She died in childbirth. And we're all round the post-mortem table, and he gets his knife, he cuts round the mound of Venus, throws it on the stab, and says, "That's what you men go mad over." Cool, brother, a couple of fellas been out like a light. Well, then I'd been post-mortem before, it didn't affect me, but he was a right callous bastard. After this convoy came in, things got a little bit better, but Jerry was still trying to bomb us into submission, and some of the little things that happened was very annoying. We had Jeff and I were out walking towards the letter one day, and a big staff guard goes flying past, can't see who's into or what. Anyway, he stops, reverses back. It's a GOC, Major. "Why didn't you two men salute me?" "Said I didn't salute me." "So we never saw you, sir. You're going too fast." He said, "Always be observant." He said, "Give me another salute." But that's the sort of thing you have to put up with, you know. And on another occasion, they had a merchant cruiser called the Breckenshire, used to run the blockade from Alexandria to Malta, because she was a very fast ship. Well, she got bombed as she approached Malta, and she was beached. They put the DLIs on board, not DLIs, the Royal Irish Fusiliers, to unload her. And what they found cases of Blanco to do the webbing with, so they just tipped it overboard, and a lot of them got put on the charge over that. I mean, we're a besieged garrison, need all the supplies, and they're sending us bloody Blanco. That shows the mentality of some of those people higher up. Then we started getting a few cigarettes out from England. My father used to send me some duty free, and I used to get them occasionally, but the post used to be very erratic. It'd go on our orders, all mail posted in the UK between such and such a date and such and such a date. Lost by enemy action. In fact, I got one Christmas parcel a year late. a year after I should have done. But funnily enough, the Christmas cake in it was quite eatable. It was very enjoyable, in fact. But when you think of what it was like in those days, you can't visualise it now. How you existed. I mean, the poor civilians, they were living in hovels, dug out the walls and that sort of thing, or in bombed out buildings. On another occasion during this hectic spell, Jeff and I were in Valletta. We was having a drink in the gut, and somebody come running down there, red flags up, and that meant that when danger was imminent, they used to hold up a red flag over the Castile building in Valletta. So we got turfed out of the bar, and we went down a civilian shelter. And just as well we did, because they had so many hundred planes raised Valletta that day, and in the shelter there, it was, all the walls were flaking off and dust coming down. They had a little altar there, and the Maltese were around it praying, doing the rosary. Anyway, when we came up, I went down the main street, Strada Reale. The Opera House, a marvellous building it had been totally demolished, and it's never been rebuilt. But I've been back there since. Lovely building it was. Then on another occasion, I wasn't there at the time, but it is true. There was a cinema in the main street in Valletta, just below the auditorium floor. Went down steps, there's a little bar there where you could get a drink. Well, apparently this had a direct hit, this pub, this cinema, dozens killed. But when they came to dig down, the bar had been blocked off, and there's the barmaid and about 3 soldiers in there, all as drunk as lords. They luckily survived. They'd been entombed, but they were up air until they got rescued. Then on another occasion, a German pilot landed parachuted into Valletta, and before the military could reach him, the Maltese got hold of him and tore him to pieces. Terrible. And the Hermann Göring squadron was operating over Malta, and one pilot was well known for machine gunning our pilots who was bailed out over St Paul's Bay in particular. Well, he got shot down himself. So as he was coming down, the Royal Irish Fusiliers on the beach defences opened up with their machine guns and cut into ribbons. Talk about total war, that was it. And Screwball Burley was a pilot there. He shot down about 30 planes, I think, when he was in Malta. Got a TFC, military cross, a military medal, military cross, TFC, TSO and bar. Really prolific fighter pilot. And at one time he was shot down over St Paul Bay himself and brought into hospital. But he was up next day. Yes, funny. And then another fellow there, Squadron Leader McLaughlin. He lost an arm in aerial combat, but I think within a week he was up in a plane having a try out to see if he could fly again, and he finished up in the war as a fighter pilot. All the time this is going on, I'm seeing more of Pauline, and I've become quite infatuated with her. And I think Wally understands, but he never says anything. After a while, I became a lance corporal of all things, and they put me in charge of the officers' mess. But in the officers' mess, there was myself, a cook, and all the rest of the staff were Maltese soldiers. The cook was a fellow called Bill Marriott, came from Stratford, and the president of the mess was a Major William Ogilvy McFeet. He's the most nasty bit of work you could wish to meet. He was always complaining about the food, which poor old Bill couldn't do much with. I mean, we was on emergency rations, you know, that sort of thing. And what few purchases we could make locally were only veg, you know, so there was not a lot he could do. Well, Bill thought he would get his revenge. So, when he was going to have his cup of tea after his meal, he dipped his John Thomas in the teacup, stirred it round, gave it to the mess orderly, and the mess orderly took it into the mess, and he looked round the door and watched him drink it. It gave him a great deal of satisfaction, I'll tell you. But he was a terrible man, this McPhee. They had a doing a sergeant's mess one night, and the officers were invited. So the sergeant's mess caterer asked me if I would help out behind the bar. I said, yeah, sure. So I did. Anyway, I finally got to bed about 2:30 the following morning. The next thing I know, McFeet's shaking me. Corporal, where's our morning tea? You should be up to see it's done. I said, I never got to bed to the early hours, sir. He said, neither did I. I said, yes, sir, but I was working. That didn't go down very well. Anyway, they got their tea, and shortly afterwards I was moved. I was put in charge of the Malta Auxiliary Corps. They were all young lads, or elderly men, either too young, too old for military service, and all they had an armband, great coat, hat, steel helmet, respirator, and the armband to prove them MAC, Maltese. They called them Malta Auxiliary Corps, and to help me with the interpreting, I had a foreman, and we used to parade every morning before I detailed in their duties, and right next to us on the parade ground was the unit being taken by a sergeant major. There was me with my lance corporal with my mob. They called them Gates's commandos of all things. Anyway, they did all the sedentary jobs such as stretcher bearing, cleaning, you name it, they did it. Anyway, I carried on with that virtually until the time I left Malta. And then I was becoming so involved with Pauline, I thought I'd have to get away, so I went to the sergeant major and said, I'd like to apply for posting, sir. He said, well, the only posting you'll get, he said, is to a more active theatre of operations. I said, well, that'd be better than this. So anyway, heard no more, but in the meantime, some of them had started to, who'd been there longest, so the regulars who'd been there since before the war, started getting home, and then some more went, and finally, in end of April 1944, I was posted to another hospital nearby to come home. Having arrived there in May 1940, I'd done 4 years there, and the unit I went to, I had to lose my one stripe, so I was a private again, and had to scrub me kit, scrub me webbing, and blanket it the colour that this unit had, a load of codswallop, and the steel helmet had to change the camouflage on that, so it had to tie with their unit. And they gave me the job, 2 or 3 of us who'd come from Imtafa, they gave me the job of loading up the coal to take to the depot. and because I've got smothered in dust and that. Anyway, once we found we were going, they told me we'd have to have a vaccination. So I said to the MO, I said, it won't take, sir. It won't take, it doesn't take with me. So the MO had come with us. It's Rupert Hill, good old GP, good old boy he was. He said, well look, he said, I'll give it to you. He said, well, when we're on the boat, he said, come up to me. He said, even if it hasn't taken, he said, I'll mark it in your paper as taken. Anyway, once I knew we were going, the last time, went back to Intarfa with a couple of us, saw all the old mates there and that, said goodbye to Pauline and Wally. They come up to Rabat to see me on the bus, to get a bus to the unit. Tears all around, everybody was crying. Pauline was crying. I had tears in my eyes, and oh dear, one thing with another. Anyway, next day we went down the boat and got on this old French boat, Ville d'Oran. She was doing a ferry service between North Africa, Malta and Naples. Well, we got quite a stormy passage we had through the Straits of Sicily, between Sicily and Italy. Anyway, we got to Malta, Naples, disembarked, and had to wait on the quayside all day. Now, to disembark, we had to climb over boats that were sunk, or partly sunk, which had been bombed in the harbour. Anyway, finally they put us on board an old boat called the, I'm trying to think of the name of it. I can't think of it anyway. It was an old Belgian Congo boat, proper old tub, and got on board, and we were all designated action stations. My action station was on E deck. Well, the rest of the right bloody place to be, right in the bells of the ship. Anyway, while we laid in the harbour that night, there was a heavy air raid. Fortunately, none of the boats were hit, but in the distance you could see Vesuvius in eruption, and you could see the red lava coming down the sides of the mountain. Quite a spectacular sight. And next morning we left for England, we hoped. On the way, we passed the island of Stromboli, which had a volcano, which was also in eruption, and then we got off the North African coast, and all of a sudden all the guns started opening up. We said, what the hell was that for? Well, they said, just testing the guns, because all these merchantmen all had guns mounted around and had aircraft fire. Then it came over the loudspeaker, ship's loudspeakers, news item, that a British convoy was attacked off the North African coast last night. No damage or casualties. Well, next day, as we're going through the Med, all we're seeing past us is debris, bodies floating past in life jackets, so that I like the idea of no damage. Anyway, that night they put up a smoke screen all around the convoy. On the decks they had all these canisters, they lit them up and the smoke came downstairs below. Oh, it's absolute murder. On top of which there wasn't enough room to sing a hammock, so I slept on the deck all the way home. 14 days we were getting home. Once we left Gibraltar, we went straight out in the Atlantic to miss the U-boats and the long-range aircraft coming from France. We saw one Fokker-Wulf 4-engine job come near, but she was chased off by fighters from an escorted vessel. Eventually, we came round the north coast of Ireland, saw where the Giant's Causeway is, and in the early hours of a Sunday morning we're sailing up the Clyde. and all the lights twinkling on the shore. It was a marvellous sight. Over 4 years I hadn't been home. And I thought, well, thank God for that. Once we get in there, we get ashore, get a big plate of fish and chips. So anyway, they drop anchor, and after a while it comes over the loudspeaker, "We regret you cannot disembark today as your gear can't be unloaded. The dockers are in dispute over the terms of working on a Sunday." Oh, you can just imagine, we've been mad as hell. I'm starving hungry, and when they did come on the next day, the dockers, they got a right reception, I'll tell you. It's one they never thrown overboard. Anyway, we get ashore, and they tell us we're going on leave the following day. So that night, we're in what had been previously a mixed anti-aircraft site, and we're sleeping there on bunks. They got no palliasses, just on the springs with 3 blankets. So anyway, had a good night's sleep really, but I hadn't had my clothes off from the time I left Malta in 14 days, because we weren't allowed to on the boat. So anyway, they gave him a leave pass and travel warrant, and I noticed it was only for 14 days, so I queried it. I said, I've been abroad 4 years, I'm entitled to 7 days for every year overseas. Well, they said, this unit's only been overseas 2 years, you're only going to get 2 years. So anyway, I thought, well, I'll fight it out later on. So I sent a telegram from Glasgow Central Station to my father, telling him I'd be arriving at Euston at such and such a time, I think what it was. Anyway, he was there to meet me. Quite a homecoming. You know, when I get home, I had a lovely meal, had a bath, I went to bed, tired out. Airway morning went, and my father came, "Come on, airway downstairs." I said, "I'm in the bed, I'll stay here." So I stayed here, and that night they hit the Treebor Sweet Factory in Cataline Road. But so next morning, I found out where the local Army welfare officer was, who happened to be the sitting MP, who was a Conservative, Lieutenant Colonel John Mayhew. So I went round to see him. He had an office in just by Woodbridge Park Station. I explained the position to him. "Oh," he said, "I'm not going to do that, lad." He said, "I'll see to this for you." He said, "You go home and don't worry about it." Well, within a couple of days I got a letter through with the extended leave pass and additional ration cards. So good old John May did the what for me. Well, this was about mid-May 1944, and all day long there was convoys going through the High Street towards the docks with troops going, you know, ready for D-Day. And I was out with my father one day, and a red cap came up to me and said, "Where's your leave pass, soldier?" I said, "At home." So he followed me home, and I had to show it to him. Apparently there'd been a lot of deserters, and a lot of people took me for a South African because I was so tanned. A lovely tan on me, yeah. Anyway, I had a fortnight at home, went down Sittingbourne, and to go there, I had a hell of a job getting out of the station because it was a restricted area, because it's one part of where the D-Day was being out from. Anyway, I proved that I had relatives sitting in Sittingbourne, and they let me through. And who should be waiting to meet me, because I'd written a letter saying I was going next day, was Derek and Jimmy, who were about 14 years old, come to see their brave cousin return from the wars. But anyway, that was a very enjoyable leave, and when I went back to Scotland, being back there about a week or 10 days, I can't remember exactly. D-Day happened. Well, we hung around there for another couple of weeks, and I got selected for Salute the Soldier Parade in Glasgow, but I managed to get somebody else to do it for me. Then I got detailed for Church Parade, which I did want to do, and I found out a fellow who was doing kitchen fatigues, a bit religious, he wanted to go to church, so we tried to exchange jobs. I do the cookhouse fatigues, he do the church. They wouldn't let us. So anyway, day of the church parade, me and another fellow, I'm marching into the church, I'm marching in, and I marked time at the door. I said, go on, in you go. I said, don't take part in the service, sir. Well, he said, wait here till the service over, then march back with us. So they went inside. Me and this other fellow went to wander around, and we're talking to this woman at a gateway. She said, what are you doing? We told her. She must have liked it because she went in and got some bacon and sandwich and a cup of tea each. Then on another occasion, we're doing foot drill, and this staff sergeant, I'd known him in Malta, and he'd been a quartermaster sergeant, got reduced to a staff sergeant. It said on the right, form company, but I was a right-hand marker, and I made a bit of a mess up of it. So he said, what about you, Gates? Got that Monday morning feeling? I said, yes, staff sergeant. Well, a staff sergeant, you just say staff, you don't give him the full time. And he got up his nose, so he said, fall out. So I fell out. He said, right, double up and down this parade ground. So I started doubling up and down, it started to rain. So I fell out, took shelter. He came up, he says, you're on a charge, failing by orders. So, next morning I got marched into the company officer. He said, did you fall out and stop raining? I said, yes, sir. I said, anyway, I said, there's an Army Council instruction, says an NCO won't tell a man to double unless he doubles with him. He said, you know that number of the ACR? I said, no, sir. I said, but I have seen it, which I hadn't. So he said, right, fall out. He said, go through the orderly room and see if you can find it there. Well, I spent about an hour or so looking through, I couldn't find it. So I didn't know it, I don't think it even existed. Anyway, I got marched back in. I said, I can't find it, sir, but I'm sure it's there. Oh, he said, in that case, he said, case dismissed. So, he says to the Sergeant Major, he said, Sergeant Major, find this man a job out the way somewheres. So anyway, I can say, he makes me a Sergeant Smith's waiter. So I made sure that this Staff Sergeant Smith, who charged me, got all the roughest food it's possible to give. One thing I forgot to tell you about whilst I was in Malta, I was in charge of the officers' mess, as I told you previously. The Maltese orderly had forgotten to draw the paraffin ration for the cooking for the week. So when I went to the company store next day to try and get it, he said, no, he said, you can't have it, so you have to go without for the week. I said, but the officer's food. He said, that's your fault. So I went to a lieutenant quartermaster, who was a regular soldier, come through the ranks to be lieutenant quartermaster. Great old chap he was, in his 50s. I explained to him, so he gave me a chip to get the paraffin. So I did it, sent the fellow back to the mess with it. Then the sergeant said to me, he said, now you're on the charge to find the drawing the correct day. So next morning, I'm outside the orderly room. I marched in and charged for that failing to comply with company orders of drawing the ration on the red day. Well, excuse me, guys, no excuse, sir. I said, the Maltese orderly I detailed to get it, forgot to do it. He said, well, why didn't you charge him? I said, well, so I stopped his day off. I said, I charge everybody for a little offence like that. I said, you never queue outside every morning. He says, I see your point. He's quite a decent fellow, this officer, Captain Griffiths. So I see your point. Alright, admonished. So they marched me out, and then the Sergeant Major, who had gone out to Malta as a private, he said, in future, he said, when you're in with a company officer, he said, don't talk to him like a Dutch uncle. He said, now go on, clear off. But it just shows you how petty some people are. Yeah, on the whole, I found that most of the NCOs I served with were very decent fellows, and most of the officers, especially the officers who were doctors, because they appreciated